Hello Year 9, in this video we'll be discussing GCSE Latin, what it involves, why you should take it and what the benefits of doing that subject are for you a bit further down the road. Now the spec which we're doing is the OCR Latin. That doesn't really make a huge amount of difference to you, I know, but it's worth knowing that it's one of the most respected Latin boards. They've got a long history of examining the subject, so that's the one that we've chosen to go for. So we're going to start off by thinking about, well, why study Latin, either at GCSE or beyond, and in fact at Key Stage 3 as well. That's in Year 7, 8 and 9. As you know, as I've told you several times, it's the root of several European languages, such as French, Spanish, Italian, and of course, English as well, via the Roman presence in Britain in the very, very early first millennium AD, and of course the French presence via the Normans, who of course brought French back to England, and obviously it keeps the Latin roots from there. So in other words, if you learn Latin, you will find it much, much easier to start learning these other languages later on in life, because these other languages are derived from the original kind of parent language, which is Latin. It also will help your understanding of English as a language too. For starters, it will teach you really, really clearly how languages are actually constructed and put together, how their grammar works, and that will actually help you a lot with your understanding of English, which will be of great benefit when it comes to things like the English language GCSE, and very particularly the English language A-level as well, if that's something we choose to do. There's also a benefit in that lots and lots of high-level English vocabulary is derived from Latin words. As you've seen during lessons, where Mr. Crow or I will pause and actually link a Latin word that we've just learned back to an English word. That can be done for so many high-level English vocabulary words because they come from this root language. So the more you know about Latin words, the better you will be able to use English. The mythology and culture of ancient Rome lies at the heart of much of our culture and society today. So the more you study the language, the more you can access Roman culture. The more you can access Roman culture, the more you can understand the culture of the modern European world. And on a really basic level, GCSE Latin is recognised as a challenging academic qualification. Really not that many schools in this area do it. You'll be among a very small minority of people who actually have access to this subject, and it's one which is regarded really, really well as something that is challenging and academic. So the people who choose to take it on must therefore be academic themselves, which is a really good sign when you're applying for things like colleges or A-level courses or even degree courses later on in life. So it looks impressive for people looking at your list of academic qualifications. These are just some of the places that Latin can take you. Now, as you know, Latin itself is a dead language in that there is not that many people around who use Latin conversationally. However, there are lots of career paths which use Latin for really specific career-based uses, such as, for example, in biology, in medicine, in the law. But the skills that learning Latin brings with it, the ability to view something highly analytically, the attention to detail, the precision that studying Latin forces you to eventually develop, are really, really helpful in other career paths as well. So, for example, in education, in architecture, which is a career all about that attention to detail, in the study of history, and also in research more generally. Obviously, of course, it does help you, as we've mentioned, with the study of languages, and that can lead to a whole different array of different places and career paths to take you down, such as interpretation, translation, working in any career path abroad. Being able to study a language and learn a language effectively can open up so many doors, and Latin opens lots of those doors through being the parent to lots of these European languages. So, in terms of thinking about what we would actually study, it's worth thinking about the different parts of the actual GCSE. So most of the GCSE, in fact 50% of it, is obviously looking at your ability to understand the language. And what the GCSE will ask you to do, what it'll develop your skills in doing, is to translate, to understand and respond to unseen passages, as in to be able to be presented with a passage of Latin and be able to translate it and answer questions on it. To be able to understand the derivations of English words from Latin words. Now, we've already talked about this during this video, but to be able to make those links between English and Latin. We may start with the skill of translating short, simple sentences into Latin. Now, again, this is not necessarily something that you will need to do in the working world. However, again, it is a skill which people, while they may not necessarily say, we want someone who can learn Latin, what employers may be looking for is saying, we want someone who has the capacity to translate things, to be able to have that knowledge of two working languages, and that's actually a really helpful skill to have. Lastly, there's the skill of being able to parse different sentences. And parsing, when it's spelt like you can see on the screen, P-A-R-S-E, is all about breaking down sentences into their individual components, being able to spot, for example, what tense a verb is in, what case a noun is using, and what role then that therefore has in a sentence. And that's all about that attention to detail, which we've already discussed. Another part of the GCSE is looking at Latin literature, because we're not just going to be doing individual sentences about Caecilius all the way through. We are obviously going to be looking at what the Romans said, did, learned, and wrote themselves. And so we'll be looking at some actual Latin texts. We'll be learning those set texts. We'll be seeing what the Romans actually wrote. And of course, as you'll know from English, when you're looking at a text, it's very important to connect that text to the context in which it was written. We'll also be analysing those original texts as a piece of literature. So if you enjoy in English actually analysing the language techniques that a writer uses, if you like looking at similes and metaphors and that kind of thing, that's exactly what we'll do with Latin literature as well. So at the moment, we've got a few options for our literature piece which we choose to translate. Our current options are these. We've got one based around conflict and conquest, which are a few different extracts based around various Roman battles, based around the Boudiccan revolt in the early 60s AD in Britain, and at marital conflict as well, conflict within marriages. Another option is looking at the myth of Echo and Narcissus. This is a really, really fascinating and iconic Greek myth, which is then later retold by a Roman author called Ovid. And it's a myth of self-obsession and of obsessive and maddening love. So it's a really, really interesting myth to do. And I'm quite looking forward to looking at that in the original Latin. Last but not least, we've got the choice of the Aeneid. Now, the Aeneid is essentially a Roman epic along the same lines as the Greek Iliad or Odyssey. But in book 6 of the Aeneid, which is where the extracts that we would look at come from, it's a journey into the underworld. So a really, really interesting part of the book. Now, we haven't yet decided which of these options we're going to go for. We'll do that once we're a bit further into the course and we know what would suit our cohort most effectively. But bear in mind that any of these options would be equally brilliant to do. The final section is looking at Roman culture. And what we would do here is we'd use a variety of sources, both literary and archaeological, to learn about the culture of Rome and its empire. Now, what that does is it really sets the study of the language into context. We're not just studying Latin against no background at all. We're looking at the actual background of the Roman Empire and how the language was used and why it was used in that way as well. Within this culture section, we'd also be learning how to evaluate our primary sources, so the things actually from the time of the ancient Romans, and that will let us work out how useful those sources can be. Now, there are two areas which we would study within culture, and let's look at them both now. So the topics are these. Roman Britain, and there's a few different parts to each one. So in Roman Britain, we would study the Roman army, its tactics, its camps, its formations. Really, really fascinating part of this. Roman roads, how they were built, why they were built, where they were built. And I'm running out of question words for the beginning of that. When they were built, in fact, as well. Roman villas, and this is a really significant part of the Roman presence in Britain. It's also very local as well. We know we've got the Roman villas up on Eastcliff, which are currently being excavated before they accidentally drop into the sea. And Roman bath. Now, I've got to be really specific here. We're not just looking at Roman baths generally, we're looking at the city of Roman Bath, as in Aquae Sulis, the city, the Roman city in the West Country, where there is a huge amount of archaeological remains. The other topic is entertainment. And within this, we study the amphitheatre and the different kinds of events that would go on in there. The theatre at Pompeii, and actually what Roman theatre looked like, the different elements to a performance of Roman comedy or Roman tragedy. The Circus Maximus and chariot racing. Lots and lots to learn about this. And in particular, the Circus Maximus, which is a fascinating building in Rome. And dinner parties, and what going to a Roman dinner party would actually have been like, who would have attended, what would have happened there. Obviously, yes, they would have eaten dinner, but there was more to it than that as well. So we've got lots and lots of different elements to study within this, and these are how it would be assessed within actual exams. So paper 1 is an hour and a half long, and that's the language paper. That's where you're really focused on actually translating unseen passages, breaking down individual sentences. And obviously that is a longer exam because that's where most of the marks in a language GCSE would come from. In paper 2, that's an hour long, and that features both the literature half and the culture half. So it's a chance to actually pick up quite a few marks quite quickly. But of course, there would be references to language in there as well, because of course the literature half is where you are referring to something which you've already learned by translating it from Latin. Now, if you have any questions about any of these, please do email either me or Mr. Crow, and we'll happily be able to get back to you with any answers to your questions. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you in GCSE Latin.